Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 3, Karma Yoga, verse 42. Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhya param mana manasastu para buddhir yo buddhe paratastu sa. Ahu, it is said, they say, that the sense organs, indriyani, it means not only the sense organs but also the motor organs. That the sense and motor organs are superior to the gross body. The mind is superior to the organs. But the intellect is superior to the mind. And that which is superior to the intellect is that very one. The one which is the subject matter of all the scriptures. That very one which is the goal of all human life. That one, the self. Here, the question was, why do we take the path of sin as if somebody impels us into it, though we are unwilling many of times? And the Lord has identified the impelling, you can say, force, one that pushes you, as it were, which is Rajoguna. And because of this Rajoguna, there is the rise of these desires. And the Lord is also very clear that the senses, the mind, and the intellect are its abodes. Once you know this is the enemy, and once you know these are the abodes, what do? Well, you go and try to exterminate that enemy. Why should we? Well, if we don't, we are under the powers of ignorance, of attachment and revulsion, of death and constant suffering. This is what is called samsara. Now the Lord is giving you the specific instructions about how do you conquer this enemy. We have seen 3 examples given by the Lord. First is like fire, always associated with smoke. Like a mirror or a piece of glass completely covered by dust and dirt. And the third illustration is like a fetus is completely covered by the womb. So these 3 illustrations are given for the 3 types of abodes of the desires and anger. Kama esha, krodha esha. Here we have, if you get the enemy on the first, you can say, abode, you can easily kill, because you can easily discern between the fire and the smoke. When it comes in the mind, it's difficult. It is more like that piece of glass completely covered by dirt and dust. And when it goes even further into the intellect, then it's like a fetus completely covered by the womb, and you won't even know it. Here, the Lord says, they say. Who says? The learned, the people who have realized this fact, the people who know, they say. Not every Tom and Dick and Harry. They say things which are contrary. They say, whoa, okay, you go and you enjoy yourself, let your senses be unrestrained. And today, what we are seeing everywhere is the result of this philosophy of non restraint. Every, you can say, foray into this world of senses leaves us scorched, and the reaction is misery. So it is clear that this philosophy of uncontrolled hedonism, enjoyment, have this, have that, and more and more and more. Doesn't matter. If you don't have money, take a credit card and spend and enjoy. Go about. See this world of sights and taste and touch and smell. How beautiful this world is. Why are you calling it miserable? But we know that what attracts, what allures, also deludes us. So these senses are the first agents of our own destruction. Spiritual destruction, of course. Mental or psychological destruction. All what you see in this world today, in families and communities and societies, everywhere, there's a high level of stress and tension and hyper activity and attention deficit and post-traumatic stress. And the works, you get a whole string of beautiful, you can say, mental diseases. So they say, the guys who know, those who have conquered these desires and angers, they say that the sense organs are superior. Superior to what? The commentator says, to the gross body. Well, to the gross body? Yeah. If you have a body and you don't have this sensory and motor organ, what use is this body? Imagine, you will be just not like a lump of flesh sitting down doing nothing. It is these senses that impel you, and then the impressions come in. But that's a different story. Let's not go into that. So here's the first abode. Now, the idea is, if you want to kill an enemy, okay, you'll have to take recourse to something even stronger. That thing that is stronger will subdue the enemy. Okay, this is understood. So then, the mind is superior to the organs, obviously. See, everything comes into the brain, and there are all these impressions, and those impressions are translated into actions. There's an impulse from outside, and there's again the impulse from inside. And what is left is a residues of those experiences, good and bad and indifferent. So the mind kind of ties all experiences together. If you don't have a mind that ties everything together, you will have big problems. You will deny that you've seen this kind of thing there. So there has to be a kind of a continuity. There has to be a kind of some agency that harmonizes each and every experience and each and every sensory and motor activity. That's why the mind is superior. So if you want to subdue the senses, go to the higher ground, the mind. You can control the senses, the mind. Those who have been following the Kathopanishad, there, the illustration given in the Kathopanishad, we have this Kathopanishad on every Wednesday morning, 10:30. There, the illustration of a chariot is given. That kind of gives us an idea where exactly we've got to hold ourselves. So the chariot is the body. This is important. Yeah. Along with the wheels, of course. With the axle also. And the seat, of course. So we have different limbs of the body, there are different parts of the chariot. But the chariot has, as you know, horses. And these horses pull the chariot. What are these horses? These are the sense organs. The horses are the sense organs. So these sense organs, they draw the chariot, like horses draw. Now, what connects the sense organs or the horses to the chariot? It is the reins. It is the kind of the harness that is put there, connecting the horse's head to the one who holds the reins, the harness. That is the intellect, and the reins is the mind. So if the intellect is strong, is discerning, you can drag the reins in harness, which drags in the horses, which controls the horses, and then the body also is controlled. So this breakup is given for us in order to separate the different components in ourselves. So these horses, they run and it's dragging the body. And what connects the horses and the body? The reins, the harness, and it's in the hands of the intellect. That's why higher than the mind is the intellect, as I say. But the intellect is superior to the mind. Here it is. Now, if the intellect is weak, we know what happens. The horses simply drag you wherever you want to go and wherever you don't want to go. It's the horses are dictating what you do and what you don't do. But what about the soul, the individual self? That is the rider in the chariot. Poor guy, he sits down there. He's supposed to be the boss out there, but he had delegated that work to the intellect. And the intellect is being dragged by the horses, the senses, and the mind has a secondary role here. So, to control the senses, you need to go to the mind. And to control the mind, you need to go to the intellect. That is the idea. I think this is clear. This verse, they say that the organs are superior to the gross body, the mind is superior to the organs, but the intellect is superior to the mind. That which is superior to the intellect is that very one. This almost similar verse is found in the Kathopanishad, first section, third part, and 10th or 11th verse. So there also the same scheme is given in order to bring the senses under control. Why are the senses uncontrolled? Obviously, we have let them do what they want. And it's been going there for a long time. And we are under the impression that wherever it goes, that is the reality. But we find this reality that we pinned our hopes on, our life on, everything on, is so transitory. It is burning us. And that is why they say that the senses have to be restrained. Now, when the senses are weak, you see what happens is, weak in the sense of, the senses are weak because there is no power built into them. You have one piece of chocolate, you have two pieces of chocolate, you have three pieces of chocolates, and you say, enough. No. That goes to see the show that the senses are very weak. You want to see a particular thing, you go for it, and you go for it, and you go for it. After a while, you recoil from it. You want a particular thing, and after a while, you let it go. And then the next day, you want it again. What's that? Well, when you had it, why didn't you extract the maximum? Well, you see, I couldn't do that. And this shows that the senses are extremely weak, extremely fickle, extremely fragile. It's simply not possible for a person to keep on living on a sensory plane over and over again. That person is like a brute. Yeah, the senses are what drives the lower, you can say, creatures. You should not be saying lower creatures, but creatures other than this. They too have their feelings and everything, but their life is in the senses. Swami Vivekananda says nobody can eat with the same gusto like a dog or a wolf. Their whole life, their whole kind of prana is in the senses. Like they enjoy tremendously, they suffer also tremendously because their life is in the senses. And if we live in the senses, we become like that. Animal, brutish. And we are seeing how things are kind of playing out on that brute level. All the civilization and all this culture that we are so proud of is just a veneer, just a kind of a thin surface, just a polish. Society was built on very high ideals. And to actualize these high ideals, the first thing that you got to do is to restrain. You know, in Swami Vivekananda, when he was here, in one of his lectures, he said, suppose you remove off the police and see what happens. Unrestrained behavior. People will bring all their evil tendencies out, all their demonic tendencies out, all the destructive capabilities out. It is the police that makes us moral. And we have seen what happens. In the last few days that we have experienced all this, well, this shows that society is based on the premise of restraint. No society can exist without this idea of restraint. You need to restrain yourself. Otherwise, you cannot build a society. And that's why restraint. So as you restrain them, the senses become strong. Strong in the sense they become integrated. And the mind keeps on pulling at them. The hand of the intellect, of course, keeps on pulling and pulling and pulling. So that is okay. Now, another argument is that which is external is more gross, more limited, and more heavy. That which is more internal is more subtle. It reveals things. It is more pervasive inside. Earth is a nice example. It is heavy, it is limited, it can be measured, but air or space is more subtle, yet it's there. So the more internal you go, the more subtle it becomes, the more pervasive, the more stronger it is. So you might say, oh, the senses are strong, the mind is stronger, technically, when you keep on pulling it. And the intellect is even stronger than them. In Vedanta, the two faculties of mind and intellect are entirely, you can say, different functions. Everywhere else, it's just mind. It's lumped together. But here we have the mind and the intellect and the ego and the memory. So the Katha Upanishad says the sense objects are higher than the senses, and the mind is higher than the sense objects, but the intellect is higher than the mind, and the great soul is higher than the intellect. Wow. Then you say, what's higher than the intellect? Here it is said, is that very one. That's a great soul. Wow. What's that great soul? Mahanatma. And then, what is higher than that great soul? Mahanatma. He's saying Mahata, Paramavyakta. That is the unmanifest. And then what's higher than the unmanifest? That is the supreme soul, the Purusha. There is nothing higher than the Purusha. That is the highest goal. That is, you can say, the culmination. Indriyebhya parahyartha artebhyasya param mana manasastu para buddhir buddhiratma mahan para mahata paramavyakta avyaktat purusha para purushanna para kinchit sakashta saparagati. So we have a kind of a graded scheme of creation here. From the highest, the supreme, the absolute reality, that appears as transformed into various grades of existence. And the lowest, the grossest is the senses. And the senses have to have objects out. They're kind of a lock and key. It's simply not possible to have senses and no objects. Sensory objects, sight, sound, taste, smell. These are objects. Now, if you have objects, sense objects, and if you don't have senses, again you have a problem. So, it's designed in such a way, this senses locks into this world. And that's why it's a kind of a symbiotic relationship. The senses, the world. If you don't have senses, there's no world outside. It's simple as that. So this senses is this entire world. Higher than that is the mind that harmonizes all these experiences, which is a weak instrument compared to the intellect, buddhi. And higher than the buddhi is the collective buddhi, the collective intelligence, which is called Hiranyagarbha. And higher than the Hiranyagarbha is that consciousness which is called Ishvara, Maya. And higher than that Maya is that Purusha, that soul. So our journey is a kind of reverse journey. That is what this verse is trying to tell us. Get back, return. No knowledge, no spiritual knowledge is ever possible without the control of the senses. It's simple. It's the alpha and the omega of all spiritual practices, of all religious endeavors. Without the control of the senses, say goodbye to spirituality. You might get a little kind of motivation, you might get a kind of little uddipana, as they say, a kind of inspiration, but it's not going to last. It's not going to transform your character and change the orientation of your life. So the first thing that one does in spiritual life is senses. You come out of your animal self. You give up your animality, your brutish, then you come mind, mana. You are there kind of human, more human. Oh, okay. And then you get back inside and become a god. All these three things are there within us. The animal, the human, and the divine. Which one would we select? We will select the divine, but somehow, somewhere we made a mistake and we mistook that divine for the animal, the brute, and we are paying the price. So the next verse, which is the last verse in this third chapter of Karma Yoga, is, and we will start the fourth chapter today. Evam buddhe param buddhva samstabhyatmanam jahi shatru mahabhavo kama rupam durasadam. By realizing that which is thus superior to the intellect, and by completely establishing the mind with the help of the intellect, O mighty armed one, kill the enemy in the form of desires, which is difficult to subdue. So, there, he's saying, by realizing that which is superior to the intellect, to the buddhi, which is that the Atman. And what do? Samstabhya, by completely controlling. What? The mind by the intellect. So the intellect controls the mind, completely withdrawing itself. Then, what do? You dance? No, you don't dance, not right now. What you do is kill that enemy called desire. It's not just one kama rupam, it's a form of desires. So various form of desires. And kill it. Arjuna was a warrior. He is out to kind of go and battle it out with his with other part of the family which has thrown them out of their kingdom. So he was a trained warrior. So he's saying, he's using those very words. Now you're a warrior. Kama rupam, kill. And Mahabhav, the mighty armed. So he's trying to kind of awaken that sense of strength in him. You are a warrior and you are mighty armed. There. Now go out and kill. Don't try to be soft. Don't try to be kind of nice. Be nice to me, the desire will say. And then the moment you divert your attention, it's taking you for a ride. Don't be nice. You've got to be a heroic warrior out there. Kind of, oh, we are now spiritual people. We want spiritual goals, and we are looking for spirituality. And this kind of softy attitude will not do for spiritual life. For spiritual life, you've got to be heroic. So go out and kill, or get killed in the process. So Swami Trigunatitananda, he used to have all these placards, in the first Hindu temple in San Francisco. Do or die, the kind of a do or die. And below down he used to use, but you will not die. So do or die, but you won't die. But you will do it. So one will have to awaken what? That sense of your real identity. That you are that Atman which is beyond destruction. It is bliss. It is real existence. Once you are told, this afternoon we were kind of speaking about, there was a lioness, big with young, pregnant, and she was stalking a few goats, and then she leapt. But in the effort, she died. But before she really died, she gave birth to a cub. The poor lioness died, a cub was born, and the goats saw this poor cub, and the cub saw these goats, and thinking that it's their mothers or family, they went around with it, and slowly it grew up, eating grass and bleating, and like a goat. One day, a big lion was stalking some goats, and he was surprised to find a lion in their midst, behaving like a goat. Well, and when he tried to kind of chase them, that goat lion also fled. Now he was curious. What happened? So that big lion one day finally managed to catch that goat lion and pull him, saying, "You are a lion." And he started bleating, "No, I'm a goat." He dragged that goat lion to the banks of the river. "Look at my face in the reflection. See my face." "Yeah." "See your face." "Oh, yeah." And then it put a piece of meat in its mouth. Tasted that smell of blood. And then the big lion roared. And then that goat lion also roared. Swami Vivekananda uses it as, replaces it with sheep also. So this identity of this lion was completely submerged by the identity of that goat. It kept on thinking itself as a goat until somebody or some guru or some instruction come and say, "You are not a goat, you are a lion." And then he rose. That is what is Vedanta Keshari, with the lion of Vedanta. This is not meant for the weak-hearted, for the weak need. It is meant for people with that strong, heroic fiber. And you have it in all of us. Once we know that we are lions, not goats, then comes the realization, oh, what was I deluded about with these kind of small things? Then comes the awakening. And it takes just a fraction of a second for that real inspiration to come. It shifts your center of gravity to the Atman instead of the senses or the mind or the intellect, and game over for you. So here he says, Jahi Shatrum, kill that enemy, O mighty armed one, which is that enemy which is difficult to kill, Durasadam. And what's that? Form of desire. Kamarupam. You see, if you try to go for a frontal attack, it will lead you round and round. Round LA and round California and round the USA, around the whole world. It will take you for a ride. It has various forms. It might come to you. Satan comes to you in the form of a mendicant or a sage and tempts you and leads you astray. You've got to be able to identify it. And when you can identify it with your intellect, oh, this is, I can see to the facade, I can see to the mask, you're not going to kind of be deluded. So here he's saying, Evam buddhe param, by understanding buddhva, that the self is higher than the intellect. Param buddhe param buddhva. Samstabhya, control the mind through the intellect and kill the enemy. Don't be merciful there. Okay. But then what happens, like when you shift your center of gravity to the Atman, everything, the whole world becomes what it was, an illusion. You suddenly know, what was I doing? Vedanta also says, yeah, it was like a long dream. The dream breaks. You realize the Atman. This is what it is. We are right now in the midst of a long dream. But you've got to be asleep to dream. You can't be awake and dream. You've got to be asleep. So we are in the sleep of ignorance. And sometimes the dreams are nightmares. In fact, most of the times they are nightmares. So we are sleeping, we are dreaming over this world. When we reach back to the Atman, we'll find the whole thing over. The dream breaks, the illusion breaks, you wake up. This is what it is. So what's the Kamarup? What's the form of this form of desires? This whole world. This whole world is a form of desires. Is that only? No, it's here also. My body, which is a product of this world. The senses are the product of this world. The mind also is a product because they are all linked. So everything is this desire. Sri Ramakrishna says, what is Maya? Lust and greed. Simple as that. Desire and this greed, that also is another form of desire. You give this up and you're free from Maya. You realize Ishvara, the Lord. Om Tat Saditi Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Karma Yogo Nama Tritiyodhyaya. This is the scripture on yoga. This is the Upanishad. This is the knowledge of Brahman. This third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is a dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna. We start with chapter 4 because we also have a little time, and not only time, I also promised Tara, we can start on chapter 4th. The fourth chapter is called Jnana and Karma Sannyasa. Knowledge and the renunciation or the relinquishment of karma. How to cut karma and how the knowledge arises. These are some of the beautiful, you can say, verses. This fourth chapter. So after Arjuna had posed this question and Sri Krishna gave him the appropriate answer, the Lord says, Sri Bhagavan Vacha Imam vivasvate yogam proktavan aham avyayam vivasvan manave praha manurikshva kave bravet. So here, my God. So imam, this, what this? The Lord says, this yoga. What yoga? The second and the third chapters has been enumerated the yoga. The second chapter was the chapter of knowledge, Sankhya Yoga. And the third chapter was a chapter on Karma Yoga. Why these two yogas are separate? This is steadfastness in knowledge, the second chapter. This is the steadfastness in work, in karma. These two have to be combined. This Karma Yoga, steadfastness, leads us to steadfastness and knowledge. So it's like the two complementary sides of yoga. If yoga is not practical, if yoga is not experiential, there's no point in yoga. So you read the philosophy of yoga, you read it thoroughly. Very good. But if you don't practice it, it's something like that. Like everything. So he says, this yoga, is it new? Saying, I imparted this imperishable yoga to Vivaswan. We'll come down to Vivaswan taught it to Manu, and Manu transmitted this to Ikshvaku. The second verse is, which is the continuation of this first verse. The king sages knew this yoga, which was received thus in regular succession. That yoga, O scorcher of enemies, is now lost due to a long lapse of time. Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshayo viduhu sakale neha mahata yoga nashta parantapa. So here, in these two verses, I imparted this imperishable yoga. Why is this yoga with him? Because it will give you imperishable results. The results of this yoga cannot be destroyed by anything. So that's why it's called imperishable yoga. To Vivaswan. Who is the Vivaswan? The firstborn. Wow. The firstborn in this universe. Vivaswan taught this to Manu. Who is Manu? Manu is the progenitor of all creation. And man is derived from the word Manu. So we have. And why man is derived? Because mana, mind, is also a kind of a derivative of that. So if you don't have a mind, you don't be anything. So Vivaswan taught this to Manu. And Manu transmitted this to Ikshvaku. Ikshvaku was the king of the solar dynasty. This Ikshvaku gave it to his descendants. And they were the king sages. Plato speaks about philosopher kings, Oh, You know where he got his, probably he got his idea from here. Rajarshaya, the king sages. These king sages knew this yoga, which was received thus in regular succession. So today, this book, this Bhagavad Gita and all the scriptures on yoga have been received in regular succession over millions and millions and millions of years. That yoga, a scorcher of enemies, is now lost owing to a long lapse of time. Because a long lapse of time, this science of yoga had to be revisited, retold, and for us to be re-educated with it. And who can do that? The one who told the story in the first place, that Lord. Now he is restating this yoga according to this time and place, according to the present humanity, due to a long lapse of time. So, we have a kind of a tradition here. And which is important. Along with creation, the science of yoga was also given together. Imagine. So it was not a kind of a creation, just a material creation, no, kind of a self-sustaining kind of mechanism is running about blindly. No. There was a deliberate, a conscious direction given to this whole creation in the form of the science of yoga, in the form of the science of the Atman, the self, the Brahma Vidya, the knowledge of Brahman. Creation had to kind of be guided by this knowledge, by this yoga. But due to a long lapse of time, people forgot the whole thing. So it's going to be restated by the Lord in this 4th chapter. Okay. Now there are certain kind of difficult things here, but let's take this. One thing is until and unless you receive knowledge from traditional sources, it's not authentic. That's the reason why you have over the internet and you have YouTubes and you have the mass of people talking sometimes nonsense. When I say, wonder what's wrong with this, then I understand these people have not traditionally studied and learnt and practiced this science. And they become inauthentic. And what happens when you become inauthentic? You mislead people. It's simple as that. So here there is something called a knowledge that is being transmitted. Sri Ramakrishna was taught by whom? Thotapuri. Thotapuri was taught by his teacher. Another, that knowledge of Brahman, that Brahma Vidya, they were knowers of Brahman. And that was an ancient lineage. It was protected by sages and saints over millennia. How did they protect this? By study and practice. Throughout the entire series of, you can say, years and years and years, the Lord comes to establish this Brahma Vidya, the knowledge of Brahman, nothing else. So we have the Lord stating here itself, this knowledge, the Brahma Vidya, this knowledge of Brahman, I am going to restate, because I had already stated it at the beginning of creation. I had given to, you can say, Vivaswan gave it to Manu gave it to Ikshvaku, the king. And then the progression of royal sages. Why royal sages? Yeah, kind of. That's the ideal. They are, you can say, kings as well as sages. And you find in the Upanishadic literature, you have people going to these sages, these king sages, to learn. Brahmins going to them. They're saying, we kings, we rule because we know this knowledge. This knowledge was not with you. So please teach me. It's not proper form that you will come and learn from me. But anyway, I'll teach you. Okay. In many of the Upanishads, you find kings, royal kings and royal sages deliberating and debating this knowledge of Brahman. That was a kind of a glorious period. So this was, and it was given to authentic disciples. So anybody outside the tradition is suspect. There has to be a kind of a continuity, a knowledge that has been coming from years and years. So that original knowledge now is embellished with your own personal realizations. So for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, that original knowledge had been embellished by the realizations of sages and different sages down those long years. So the king sages knew this yoga, which was received thus in regular succession. And this, the Lord says, He says that I imparted this imperishable yoga to. Now, at the beginning of this kalpa, cycle, it's a 1 day of Brahma. That is about 1 day is about 432 billion years. 423 billion years. That is, according to that mythological calculation, that's a 1 day of Brahma. That's one cycle of creation. And this cycle of creation is divided into 7 main parts, 14 parts. And we are in the 7th. The Manu, in this Manvantara, the age of Manu is Vaivasvata Manu. So we know who started this whole thing, who received this thing. The first Manu was Swayambhuva Manu, the first one. And then we come Vairochana and this and that, all these things, and now we are on the 7th age of Manu. So the Lord had given the first Manu, Swayambhuva Manu, this knowledge. And that has been coming down over and over and over. But technically, yes, this verse is interpreted also, he gave it to this Manu, Vaivasvata Manu, the 7th. Every age of Manu, he gives it. Okay, this is that yoga. So it's a very huge period, and this world is an ancient world. And the Lord is giving us the future, you can say humanity, the seeds of this knowledge of Brahman, so that we will harvest that knowledge when we come down to the level of human beings, when we will become competent to practice yoga. So, you say, what has God done for me? Because sometimes you say, sometimes even if you acknowledge there's a God, what has God done? What is God doing? As if this guy with the puny intellect can comprehend God's actions. So these scriptures give us a kind of idea of why the Lord is so beneficent, why He cares for everybody and every creature. Saying, work out your own salvation. This is the knowledge. You are big enough. Don't be a crybaby. You've cried long enough. Stand up on your feet and be what you are. This is the lesson. The very fact that Arjuna is being told this because he is now being brought into this tradition. This, and also he is found to be a fit recipient of this. We will stop here for now. We will take this up next Thursday. We'll recap a bit on this first and second verses and then proceed to the third. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.